got an exciting evening tonight. I'm excited.
No pressure.
But we begin by saluting the shrine and then I'll introduce them. Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Dhammaya.
Namo Dhammaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Namah.
Namo Namah.
Om.
Om.
Ah.
Ha.
Om.
Om.
In Japan. I'm really excited to hear about. I've got a few notes here to remind me what to say a bit about her. She got involved in, she thinks, about 2004 in the Sheffield Sangha. She was mitred in how many years ago it is? Anyway, on this day, 2006.
18 years ago.
18 years, thank you. And she was one of a group of 16. That's amazing, isn't it? She was a physiotherapist at that time, I think, yes. She moved to Taraloka in 2009. She was still a mitra then, and she got ordained from there in 2014, and she was given her name Maitrisiddhi, which means success based in love, but it could also mean magical powers coming from love. That's my interpretation. She's now a member of the retreat team. A lot of you know her anyway. What can I say about her? I think she's someone who, I think particularly of her as someone who's brave and fearless. Following her travels online on her blog, I was often amazed at her fearlessness. Wonderful photos, wonderful anecdotes and stories, and I'd be thinking, oh gosh, I'd be really scared if that was me. And she's an inspired teacher, and I'm very, very pleased you've agreed to come and talk to us tonight. Thank you very much.
This is me just changing gear. You have the sort of chatting changing gear, and then you have sitting in front of a whole room of people that are looking at you kind of gear. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is I'm going to read a poem written by Kukai, who's a Japanese teacher. And then we're going to sit for a few minutes just to sort of like ground and settle. And then I'm going to show you some snapshots of my thrilling and exciting trip to Japan. I'm not sure what the dharmic content of this evening is going to be quite frank, but I thought we could start with some kukai, so at least there'll be that. So, kukai, so we're in 8th century Japan, sort of early medieval Japan. And Kukai wants to know how to practice the Dharma, and he doesn't know how to do it. And he goes around like asking, because Japan, Buddhism came to Japan in about the 7th century. Various different schools came across from China. And And what Kukai says is when he goes round and he tries to get the teachings, he says, it's just like listening to the whisperings of old men, and he thinks, this can't be the real deal. And so he goes to China and he meets a Shingon master. So this is a form of esoteric Buddhism, the sort that later went into Tibet as well. And he meets this master, and the master says to him, at last you have come. He knows that Kukai is going to be his disciple and take his lineage forward. And he says, go straight away, find a candle, find a stick of incense, find a flower, come into the temple, I will give you the esoteric initiations immediately. And so Kukai spends not that long in China, actually, like, I don't know, a year maybe, something like that. And he goes back to Japan, which is a very difficult and dangerous voyage at that time. And he goes back to the emperor's court and he's saying, look, there is this way of practicing the Dharma, and it has been passed on to me. And he asks the emperor, because the emperor is in charge of allowing temples to be built and allowing monks to become monks. And he goes to the emperor and says, look, there's a place high in the mountains, and it's called Koya. And it's high in the mountains, but there's a flat place. And it would be a great place there for a monastery, for a place for people to go and practice. And the emperor says oh, okay then. And Kukai, he's quite a high-born nobleman, and his friends keep on saying, look, come back to the capital, which is Kyoto, everything's going on there, you could be this great politician, you could be, you could have the top jobs, everybody wants you. And Kukai is saying, no, I need to practice the Dharma, I need to meditate, and other people will want to do that too. And he builds this monastery, which is still there now, and it's called Koya-san. San means mountain in Japanese. And this is part of a letter that he sends to a friend in Kyoto who's telling him, just come back, you could have a great life here in the city. And this is what he says to him. You ask me why I entered the mountain, deep and cold. Awesome, surrounded by steep peaks and grotesque rocks. A place that is painful to climb and difficult to descend, wherein reside the gods of the mountain and the spirits of trees. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen the peach and plum blossoms in the royal garden? They must be in full bloom, pink and fragrant, now opening in the April showers, now falling in the spring gales, flying high and low, all over the garden, the petals scatter. Some sprigs may be plucked by the strolling spring maidens, and the flying petals picked by the flittering spring orioles. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen the water gushing up in the divine spring of the garden? No sooner does it arise than it flows away forever. Thousands of shining lines flow as they come forth. Flowing, flowing, flowing into an unfathomable abyss. Turning, whirling again, they flow on forever, and no one knows where they will stop. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen that billions have lived in China, in Japan? None have been immortal from time immemorial. Ancient sage, kings or tyrants, good subjects or bad, fair ladies and homely, who could enjoy eternal youth? Noble men and lowly alike, without exception, die away. They all have died, reduced to dust and ashes. The singing halls and dancing stages have become the abodes of foxes. Transient as dreams, bubbles, or lightning, all are perpetual travellers. Have you not seen, oh, have you not seen, this has been man's fate? How can you alone live forever? Thinking of this, my heart always feels torn. You too are like the sun going down behind the western mountains, or a living corpse whose span of life is nearly over. Futile would be my stay in the capital. Away, away, I must go. I must not stay there. Release me, for I shall be master of the great void. A child of Shingon must not stay there. I have never tired of watching the pine trees and the rocks at Mount Koya. The limpid stream of the mountain is the source of my inexhaustible joy. Discard pride in earthly gains. Do not be scorched in the burning house, the triple world. Discipline in the woods alone lets us soon enter the eternal realm. So on my first solitary, which wasn't very long after I became a mitra, I spent 5 weeks in Fontainebleau Forest, camping in the middle of the forest, and there were like wild boar and all sorts of exciting things in the forest. Lots of people told me I shouldn't do it. But anyway, I did. And this poem by Kukai was something that I learned by heart at that point, and I was just sort of wandering around this forest at all hours of, like, you know, the evening as the sun was going down, or early in the morning, and just reading these lines about, I have never tired of watching the pine trees and the rocks at Mount Koya. Because actually there's a lot of pine trees and rocks in Fontainebleau Forest. And so then, you know, what would it be like 14 years later? I'm not sure what the arithmetic is. Anyway, then I actually end up going to Mount Koya where these lines were written. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to be saying a few things about my sabbatical that I had. Now, the first month was actually in India on pilgrimage, and I'm not going to tell you anything about that. But then I spent 5 months going in Japan, and what did I say? Yeah. And I think what it is like, can you see, I feel a bit uncomfortable sitting up here, and I think it's because I feel like I'm just going to be telling you, like, here's my holiday snaps. And maybe you'll like to see my holiday snaps, but, like, in a way, it's like, anyway, here we go. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably, like, say a few things and show you some slides, and then we'll have a break, and then I'll probably say a few more things so that you don't just kind of, like, get talked at an awful lot, and then we'll meditate at the end of the evening. So that's my plan anyway. Let's see what happens. Okay, so I went to Japan. Now, I didn't go to Japan because I liked haiku, ikebana flower arranging, or Japanese gardens. I actually went to Japan because I had a connection with a Japanese Buddhist teacher from the 12th, 13th century called Shinran. Come on to Shinran later. But I would not have gone to Japan if there had not also been mountains, because I used to be a rock climber, mountaineer, that sort of thing. And then what happened was, so at first I was like this fanatical rock climber, and then I became a fanatical Dharma practitioner, and I sort of just dropped the rock climbing, which was fine. I didn't regret it. I moved to Taraloka. Anyone that's been to Taraloka, you may have noticed it's flat. But then it just felt like I needed to do something that brought together the part of me that liked wildness and high places, and yeah, I suppose there's just something about mountains where it's like you see a mountain against the sky, and something in my heart just kind of goes, oh, and it happens. Even, after all the mountains in my life that I've climbed, it still happens now if I go to Snowdonia and I look up at Trivan or, Cadridris or whatever it might be, and there's something that just kind of goes, mountain. So I think Japan does have some cities. I didn't really spend any time in them. I just would kind of like go straight through on the train, So, yeah. And my other reason for going to Japan was I just wanted something that was really different. I suppose it was sort of like post-pandemic, where it's like you've done all the walks in your local neighbourhood 65 million times, and I was just like, I want something different. So, like, I thought, right, Japan, that'll be different. And it was. So I get off the plane in Kansai Airport, which is sort of in the middle of Japan, And I don't really like cities, so I didn't want to go to one of the big cities. So I just got the train to this little town where people kept asking me, why are you here? We never get tourists here. So if anyone tells you Japanese people don't speak English, loads of them do. So here I am in this little town, and it's just like a suburban street. You know, there are kind of like modern build blocks of flats and houses and people walking their dogs. And every couple of blocks, you get something like this, which is a little Buddhist temple. And they're really big into red bibs and woolly hats on their Buddhas. And the other thing, just like in a little back street of this totally non-touristy town, is a Shinto shrine. And you can tell it because it's got that big gate, which is called a torii, which means bird perch. So this is indigenous Japanese religion. I'll say more about it a bit later. Definitely very, very much alive. So this is me just landing. And the first place I go is Koyasan. And I go there because you land in a country and you have to book somewhere and you have to think, well, I want to go somewhere. Where do I go? Oh, well, I've heard of this place. Right, let's go there. So I went to stay in a monastery in Koyasan. And nowadays it's a monastic town, and it has been for, centuries, over 1,000 years. So it was founded in the 8th century by Kukai, as I was saying before. And the story is he had a 3-pronged Vajra and he threw it over the mountains, and then he went to find it. And where it landed was this perfect flat patch in the middle of the mountains. And then the gods of the mountains welcomed him as a black dog and a white dog and showed him, the perfect place to put Koyasan. So there are all these monasteries. So you walk down the street and they're just like, monks in geta, these sort of wooden sandals. You go to buy a loaf of bread or something. Oh dear, yeah, bread. That's a problem in Japan. You go to buy rice balls and there are, there's like 3 monks in the shop. So this is Kukai. I don't know what this gesture means, but he holds a Vajra back to front. So it's sort of like it's in front of him like this. So he's got his beads and he's holding his Vajra back to front. Perhaps he's about to throw it. So this is the monastery that I was staying in. Very beautiful. A monk on his hands and knees cleans this passage every day. And in the mornings, you are invited essentially to their puja, their morning puja, and you can't take any photos of that. So I'll just have to tell you about it. And what it is like, it's like a piece of very, very beautiful theatre. So they're all wearing these black and gold robes, and a lot of chanting in unison. So they chant the Heart Sutra a lot. And because it starts going ziggy ziggy zog zog, and then you can't go, aha, that's the Heart Sutra, I know it, in Japanese. And it's very, very beautiful, and they're all doing it together, and they sort of move around. They have this big fire altar where you can buy a stick of wood and put a name of somebody on and put it in to kind of have it blessed in the ceremony. And at a certain point, everyone that's watching can go round and you pour a cup of tea for Kukai, who's still in his mausoleum and he's just meditating deep under the ground. And every day the monks serve him, I believe it's lunch and supper ritually. And they still do this. And in all the different monasteries, about 100 monasteries, they're doing something like, we could all go round and we could pour Kukai a cup of tea. And then you get blessed by a nun who kind of shakes like a load of leaves and a big jangly stick over your head and chants a load of stuff. I've got no idea what was going on. So you're watching this thing happening, and it obviously means a lot. and it's complete gibberish. You've got absolutely no idea what is going on. So, yeah, this is one of the temples, classic Japanese raked gravel. And it was really cold because it's in the mountains.
How cold is really cold? What is cold?
It was probably 2 or 3 degrees, and there were still big piles of snow. You know when the snowplow goes through the streets and they pile up the snow at the sides? So it was that cold. So Japanese temples, they're sort of quite, they're sort of totally different to what we think of as a Buddhist centre. So for a start, there are lots of different buildings. So see how there are all these different buildings and pagodas, and each one is dedicated to a different figure. So that, there'll be one to, say, Varochana, and one to Amitabha, and one to Kuan Yin or whatever. And you can't get in them quite often. So you're not meant to go in, and sometimes all the doors are shut and you're not even supposed to be able to see the image. And sometimes some of them, the really precious ones, they're brought out every 33 years. And they do a puja to them every 33 years, and then they put them back again and no one can ever see them. So it's quite, it's culturally just very, very, very different. And you'll notice in my description of the puja, the monks and nuns are doing the puja, and the lay people are watching and being blessed by the monks and nuns. So you've got this very, very strong monk-lay split. Aha! Now we come to the Okoin. Anyone know how you say that? Yeah, I wasn't saying much at that time. So it's a cemetery that has been going for like over 1,000 years, and I just don't know how many graves there are there. But it's a wood, so it's in the middle of these mountains that Kukai is talking about, and it's got these huge trees, cedars and red pines, and it just keeps going. So there's about 3 miles of that path, and it just wends its way through this cemetery with thousands and thousands and thousands of gravestones. And when I was there, you can see it's really misty, and all the Japanese got their umbrellas out, which is a very Japanese thing. And you've just got monument after monument, stupa after stupa, and there's a sort of atmosphere to it. And it's almost like the air is kind of vibrating with intensity. Very, very strong feeling to the place. And as you see, just these great trees everywhere. And that's such a feature of Japan. They have so much forest. It's just incredible. So if it's someone you know or one of your ancestors, you would come and make offerings. And this would include beer and sake, rice wine. And they leave all sorts of things, like sometimes it's sweets or cakes or, so it's like anything that like a live person would like. Well, why is this person not going to want it when they're dead? Of course they're going to want it when they're dead, so there's the beer. So you just walk down this, this sort of path, seeing all this going by you, and lots of little shrines, all different kinds. Now these are jizos. So jizo is the Japanese name for Kshitigaba, and Kshitigaba is a bodhisattva who goes into the hell realms. And the story has it that she was a woman who very much loved her mother, and her mother died. And then she realised that her mother had not only died, but she'd gone to the hell realm. Doesn't say why. And the being that was to become Kshitigarbha thought, this just isn't okay. I have to practice so that I will be able to go into the hell realm and I will be able to save my mother. And so she practices, she meditates, she follows the precepts, she studies the Dharma, and she becomes a bodhisattva who is able to go into the hell realms. And so she goes to the hell realms to rescue her mother. But when she gets there, she realises she can't just save her mother and leave everyone else. She's become someone that cannot leave anyone behind. And then she changes gender to a he, although actually it's quite fluid in how they're depicted, and is the bodhisattva who carries a staff, a monk's staff, not there, but you'll see some others, a monk's staff and a light, a kind of jewel that sheds light in the darkness. So no matter how dark it is, Jizo is there and is bringing light into the darkest places. And Jizo is also associated with children, which is why you get these little bibs and caps. So in Japan, if your child dies, perhaps a stillbirth or a miscarriage, or your child dies while still a child, you would go and do rituals to Jizo, or actually more probably you'd get a monk or a nun to do rituals for Jizo for you, on behalf of your dead child. Also, women who've had abortions will do those sorts of rituals, and they're really loved. Like, everywhere you go in Japan, there are little Jizos, and a lot of them look like small children. And actually, you even see rocks that have had a bib put on them and a little hat. Or, in fact, any sort of Buddha statue, any sort of rupa, is quite liable to find itself with a little bib with lace around the edge and a woolly hat. I don't know if you can see, they also sometimes put makeup on them as well. See, that one's got some lipstick on. Oh, it's doing a different thing. There you go. You've got a whole little row. So, just imagine that you're walking through mile after mile of these. And sometimes some of the bibs are old, but, they must get renewed like every couple of months or something. And people just do it. Aha, so I know why I've got that one in there. So this is actually a Shinto temple, which Shinto and Buddhism became very, very close. They weren't really practiced as separate religions. But the reason that I'm showing you this one here is it's showing you a classic thing about, how you relate to the religious world in Japan, which is about boundaries and spaces and gateways and spaces that are sacred. So you can see you've got this kind of trellis in the front, and then you've got a gateway, and then behind you've got this house, this kind of temple house shrine area. Nobody goes there. That's where the gods live. So you stay at the gate and you bow and you clap and you make your offerings at the gate. And the sacred grove is sacred to the gods of place. So, where Kukai says, this is where the gods of the mountain and the spirits of trees reside. That is still really alive for the Japanese. And the reason that I'm showing you this is because at the end of this cemetery, after walking for a couple of miles through this cemetery, you get to Kukai's mausoleum, where it's said that he didn't die, but he's still seated in meditation. And as I told you, the monks ritually give him a meal twice a day. And there's a lot of people there, but they're not tourists. I mean, there are tourists too. But they are going there and they chant the Heart Sutra, and but the thing is, there's a building, and you go around the back of the building, and there are big troughs for incense, big stone basins for incense. And then there's a kind of trellis fence that you can't really see through. And behind there is a sacred grove with a little building, and that's where Kukai is. And you don't go there. You know, it's sacred space and you don't enter it. So it's just a very different way of thinking about things. I had a lovely conversation with somebody there because I was wearing my kesa, and so, you know, she sort of got talking to me and she was telling me, you know, what she was chanting, and she was saying, oh, what were you chanting? And I was saying, well, that was the Heart Sutra in English. In English? You chant the Heart Sutra in English? You have Buddhists in England? I had that conversation a lot about, surely everyone's Christian in England. I'm saying, well, not everybody. Okay. So Koyasan is one end of a kind of spider's web of pilgrimage routes called the Kumano Kodo. And these have a history of over 1,000 years. And they link sites that they're more overtly dedicated to Shinto gods. But what happened when Buddhism arrived is that Shinto just decided that they weren't separate. So Amitabha, for instance, is said to be a Shinto god with a particular name, and you know, Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara is supposed to be this other Shinto god. So they just kind of said, oh, well, we'll just say it's kind of the same. So, and you had serious Buddhist practitioners for centuries and centuries walk these pilgrimage routes between these sacred sites. And the emperor and his entourage would do it. Merchants would do it because it was the main artery of trade, how you could travel down the Kii Peninsula. Ordinary people would do it. There was a real tradition that you would go on pilgrimage and you would walk from sacred site to sacred site, and people still do it. So these are forest mountains. And I'm wearing my kesa the whole way down, which it got quite grubby. But I think it was important to me because I'd done so much walking in my time, if you see what I mean. And I really wanted this to be a sort of walking that was different, where I was walking as a Dharma practice and I was walking through this sacred landscape. And actually, you know, anywhere could be a sacred landscape, but this had been related to as a sacred landscape for centuries. And as you walk, you pass little rupas again and again and again, all different sorts. So there's a little house. There's one that's almost like it's been sort of water worn out of the rock. There we've got probably a jizo with a bib on. Again, a jizo, very, very common. And can you see someone's put red flowers by his feet, and those kind of green things, they're like flower holders. Let's just go back to that one. And so every time I passed one of these little rupas, I was stopping, I was bowing, I was saluting it, I was chanting whatever its mantra was. And I was getting some fairly funny looks. And I don't know, some of Japan, it can just be devastatingly beautiful. So this lake, it was a hot springs lake, which is, so it's got a lot of volcanic activity, which is why it's this green colour. And there were these sort of 2-foot fish that you could see swimming about, and you know, herons and storks flying over. And like, I couldn't quite believe this when I got there. And that's the famous cherry blossom, Yamasakura, mountain cherry, just come out. And everyone then talks about it. Everyone you pass say, oh, the Yamasakura is out, you must look at it. Hot springs, bathing in hot springs is a real Japanese cultural thing. So you're all nude, men and women split, and most people in Japan will have a hot bath every day. It's like a cultural thing. You wash first, then you soak in the bath. You don't wash in the bath, that would be dirty. And so this one has an outside hot bath. This is a guest house, not at all expensive. This is just like what all the houses have if you're in a hot spring area. So this has a hot bath, and this is outside, so it's raining, and I'm in the hot bath and I'm looking at this view. I know. I know. I tell you, I'm missing them. Oh yes. And they have a thing about shoes. Westerners just have no sensitivity about what shoes to have on where. So this whole thing about like different areas. Yeah, so like here we do it, and that's because Buddhism is an Eastern tradition, and so you take off your shoes as you come into a shrine room, you take off your shoes when you go into a museum, they give you special shoes to put on, or into a monastery or into a guest house, and can you see how slippery they are? I've got no idea how Japanese people keep them on their feet. It's really, really difficult. But it's a kind of way of honouring moving from one space to another. I mean, I even had it where, like, I went to enter one hot springs establishment, and a woman stopped me very, very politely at the door and got me to take off my outdoor shoes and put on these other slippers. And I thought, great. So then I went to go in, and then inside there was another little step. And I was just carrying on, and the woman stopped me again and said, no, you walked 5 meters in those slippers, now you change into these slippers. So I changed into those slippers, and then you sort of pay for your hot spring, and then you go a bit further in, and then you go into the actual hot spring area. There's another little step. You have to take off those slippers and wear bare feet. Like, and you mustn't put your foot on the wrong, you know, so you mustn't put your shoe on that wood, and you mustn't put the slipper on the paving. And of course, yeah, talk about mindfulness practice. You know, if you're Japanese, you just do this naturally, but I'm not Japanese, and I was trying my best, and I'd offend people by putting my shoe in the wrong place. And then you go somewhere like, I don't know if anyone's been to Adhisthana, and as you go into the shrine room, there's kind of a Buddha, and there's some little steps, and there's some shoes and stuff, and people actually leave their shoes in front of the Buddha. So, you know, in Japan, for a start, you would never ever have a Buddha in a lobby area, because a Buddha belongs in the inner sacred area, and you're lucky if you can even look at it and enter that area, let alone having it in a lobby. But at Adhisthana, I was really noticing, like, there's this Buddha, and people leave their shoes actually in front of the Buddha. Like, a Japanese person would be absolutely having kittens. We're just barbarians, you know. Oh yes, and then there was food. Yeah, I've restrained myself to one photo of food there, I think. It's very interesting. You don't know what you're eating. You don't know what order to eat it in. That was pondweed soup. I think it was probably seaweed, actually. And outside of monasteries, it's almost impossible to be fully vegetarian because everything's got fish stock in it. Even ready salted crisps have fish in. Table salt has fish in. So I did my best. they really, and all the monasteries have vegetarian food, but then if you're a monk and then you go back to see your family or whatever, well, you just eat whatever. Oh yeah, there's me in an onsen. Aha, right. So this is a big view down the Key Peninsula on the Kumano Kodo. Now, can you see the Torii Gate? It's like, where's Wally? Can you see the Torii Gate? If not, there we go. So this is there's a big river going down the peninsula, and this sacred space is a liminal space between water and land. And it's on a great sandbank where the river sweeps round in a big bend. And they used to have it actually on the sandbank, but it just got washed away so often that they sort of gave up and moved it a few hundred yards over. But it's like they choose these natural features, and everything in the natural world is a god. You know, there are other gods as well, but so here, like the river in this sandbank is divine. So you're seeing the divine everywhere. So they're quite big. Oh yes, now I'm telling you about Shinto things. Yeah. Let's see if I've got a different picture. Okay. It's very, very interesting, Shinto, because people hear about it as being a nature religion, like you worship trees. I've got a picture somewhere. Yeah, there we go. Here's a tree with the sacred rope around it, and there will be a temple built to the tree. Or here we go. This is one of the other sacred sites on the Kumano Kodo, and it's a waterfall. And you are worshipping the spirit of the waterfall. And that's very, very beautiful. And it's complicated. So here, and Shinto, so might as well tell this story now. Yeah, so I think what I realised is that very few people in Japan are Buddhist. So historically, Japan has been a Buddhist country. But actually, in the 17th century, the kind of ruling emperor, whatever, he was Confucian. You know, everyone was kind of Buddhist, but it was more of a Confucian state. Actually, in some areas of Japan, Buddhism got suppressed very severely, and they had to go and hide in caves to practice Buddhism. But even where people once were Buddhist, so that, like, for instance, like I'm walking down the Kumano Kodo talking to these people, I'm bowing to all the shrines. Generally, they're not. But what they do bow to is the Shinto shrines. So everyone in Japan, I didn't meet anyone that said, "Oh no, I don't go to Shinto shrines." And it's an ethnic religion, so it's associated with the family of the emperor, and it's quite incredible. So, like, the family of the emperor goes back to like the 5th century or something like that, and the emperor is descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu. And you know, there have been points in Japanese history where the emperor was seriously regarded as being a divine being, and they're not allowed out of their palace. They can't go anywhere. So you also get shrines to the emperors. So when an emperor dies, you get a shrine to, like, the emperor that died in 1986, for instance. And people go there and they essentially pray for what they want. So they say Buddhism, that's for death. So when you die, you pay a Buddhist priest and he'll do the funeral rites. So, you know, Buddhists, that's what you do for dead people. And Shinto is for life. So I was staying in a hostel with this one, you get talking to people, don't you? And I was talking to this Japanese chap, and he was there because his daughter was rowing in a race. She was in a, I don't know, some sort of competitive All Japan thing. And he was, and you know, it came up that I was Buddhist, and he said, "Oh, none of us believe that anymore. You know, we just think it's a load of rubbish." But this morning I got up before dawn, and I went to the Shinto shrine, and I prayed for the sun to rise and for my daughter's success in her race. So it's just very interesting. So you go to a Shinto shrine, and what there are is a whole load of things that you can buy. So if you think you've done something bad, you can buy some purification sand. Or, you know, if you're feeling a bit not so well, you could buy a good health amulet. Or look, there's a passing an exam amulet. So in all the cars, there's a little kind of amulet dangling for safe journeys. And I particularly like this one, prevent disaster bell. I thought I could do with a prevent disaster bell. We could all do with one of those. And so these are called ema, these wooden things, and they'll have a Shinto symbol on them. And you write your wish, you know, may my Auntie Bessie recover from her operation, and then you offer it to the gods. And all these papers that you can see, they're fortunes. So you'll go and buy a fortune. Or sometimes it's like put your money in the slot and a fortune pops out. And if it's a good fortune, you take it home with you. And if it's a bad fortune, you tie it on a tree or on a post so that you hope your bad fortune is going to blow away in the wind. So this is, you know, this is what everybody does. This is what everybody does. And yeah, okay. And these torii gates, you can see that I'm stood a bit off centre there, and you're supposed to walk either side because the gods walk in the middle, and you wouldn't want to bump into a god, would you, or impede a god's progress? So you have to walk either one side or the other, but not in the middle. So it's very interesting because I'd say, like, people definitely have a sense of the sacred. And there definitely are people who are Buddhist. It's, you know, I've met some very sincere practitioners, but most people are not Buddhist. So it's like in this country, you know, how many people are Christian? It's not very many. And it's the same in Japan. So this is Inari, one of the fox gods. He's a messenger of the gods. So this is another Shinto thing. Yeah, the tree. Oh, I think I'm about to climb some mountains here. It's interesting when you've got slides to talk to. So it's like, oh, yes, I'll put that in. So I did this pilgrimage. And actually, I think I'm just going to do things a bit out of order, to be honest. But one of the things that are worshipped by the Shinto tradition is mountains. So every time, you know, you go to climb a mountain and you find a torii gate and a way of making offerings. So that'll be at the bottom of every mountain. Oh, okay. Right, this is an extremely neat monastery. So you know how we take moss out of our grass? They take grass out of their moss. And in the monasteries, the monks sweep the moss every day in case leaves or sticks land on it. It's like your front room carpet. And yeah, definitely, like some places I got a very strong sense of practice, like Koyasan. And some places it really feels like this is the Japanese National Trust. And once upon a time, there was a live tradition here. And now everyone's going around taking photos and doing selfies in front of it. And Yeah, I mean, this attitude of the Japanese to Buddhism, like a lot of them, I don't think they actually know what the Dharma is. So you encounter things like, they're really big on information signs. And so one information sign I came on said, Buddhism says that when a child dies, it hasn't had a chance to make enough merit, which you would do by serving your parents. Okay, so this is Confucian from China. Okay, so if a baby dies, it hasn't been able to serve its parents, so therefore it can't move on to another life, and it's stuck on the banks of a river, being tormented by demons. And you then have to do these rituals to try and save it, to get it across the river. So this is where the Jizos get in. Now, just consult your knowledge of what the Buddha said. Did the Buddha say anything about that? No. So what you've got is you've got a load of folk accretions that have kind of attached itself to Buddhism in its way across China and then into Japan. And so then this is what many Japanese people think Buddhism is, that you have to pay a priest to do rituals for your dead relatives so that they're going to be able to move on to another life. And if you don't pay the priest, there's bad consequences for your relatives. So actually, when I'm saying I'm Buddhist, people are saying, "Oh, we hate the priests. We don't want to pay all this money because you have to have a ritual when they die, and then another one after a month, and another one after 3 months, and another one after a year, and after 3 years." So, but you can also see it from the monks' point of view, because they've got these massive buildings that they're trying to keep up. And anyway, it's a whole cultural scenario, but you meet it and you think, this isn't what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm transforming the mind. And it's not that there aren't people that are doing that, but the bulk of, your average Japanese person that you meet that's not really how they think of Buddhism. So I was really delighted to go to Eiheiji, which is a monastery, the head monastery of the Soto Zen Japanese Buddhism, which this very well-known teacher called Dogen is associated with Shraddha Rochini, who I didn't know at all. She's Japanese, lives in New Zealand, and just because we were order members, a friend put us in touch. We met up. We'd never met each other before, and it was just delightful. We just talked for 48 hours constantly. We went and did our own rituals at Eiheiji. This is her in front of Kuan Yin, who is her Yidam. And, it was just so beautiful to be able to sort of take our practice there and to be able to kind of share, have a shared understanding of what the Dharma is. Yeah, this is what happened. This is Nara, where Buddhism was first encountered. So there's lots of deer, and there's lots of tourists having their photos taken by the deer. And the next thing that happens is the deer bites the girl. Okay, I think it's time for a tea break.
Part 2 after the break.
Part 2 after the break.
Right.
So basically we've got half an hour. Tell me how this sounds. What about if we do a bit of chanting and we sit for a short period now, and then I say some other things about Japan? The other option is I say some things about Japan for about 10 minutes, and then we have a sit for 20 minutes.
A lot.
Okay, right. So
It's up to you.
I don't know. No, I'd like to hear from the floor. Okay, so 10 minutes more and then sit for 20 minutes. Stick your hand in the air if that's what you want to do.
It'd be nice to have some chanting as well.
I want to see more pictures. I want more pictures too.
Okay, right. Sorry, I'm only doing 2 options because otherwise things are going to get complicated. So stick your hands up if you want more slides and less meditation. Okay, sorry folks, I think that definitely has it. Okay, so let's do a bit of chanting now. I think we should chant to Amitabha because Amitabha is really big in Japan. Lots and lots of Amida statues. The largest denominations of Buddhism in Japan are Jodo Shu and Jodo Shinshu, which all focus around Amida, the limitless light and the limitless life. And the idea is, the light travels everywhere. So no matter where you are, you cannot be separated from what is essentially the light of wisdom or the light of compassion. Like that penetrates wherever you are. So we're going to chant to Amitabha, but because this is in the Japanese tradition, you've got to think gold, okay? Not red, gold. So we'll just do quite a simple meditative one. Om Amideva Hri. 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 So then I headed for mountains. And one of the fantastic things about Japan is just the amount of forest it still has. And partly it's to do with the geology, because it's essentially the islands are created by volcanism. And it means that the mountains are very, very steep-sided and unstable. And I had a walking guide that was 20 years old. In this country, a walking guide that's 20 years old wouldn't be out of date. But because it's volcanic, it's like whole new mountains were there that weren't even in the guide. And you can't really do anything with them because it's so unstable. So you've just got a lot of mature forest. In the way that we just don't have in this country. And even though the routes that I was doing were now not pilgrimage routes, actually Japan has a long tradition of mountains being sacred spaces. So as you were seeing earlier, every mountain, there would be a Shinto shrine when you approach it, and then you get to the top. This is where I'm discovering I should have my slides in a different order. Where is it? No, never mind, I'll just have to tell you. Sometimes there's usually a shrine on the top, a Shinto shrine on the top. Sometimes there are Buddhas as well, but there's always a Shinto shrine, and sometimes it's like a rock of a particular shape that has been enshrined. And everyone, all the hikers, when they, nobody passes a torii gate without, you clap twice, you bow twice, you make your prayer. And you get to the top and you clap twice, you bow twice, you make your prayer. And Shinto, it's an ethnic religion, so it's only for the Japanese people who are descended from the sun goddess. But they really like it if you do it too. And I think what I was really loving about it was this sense of treating the world as sacred, which I just found incredibly beautiful. So, before I started to climb a mountain, I would, pay my respects to the gods of the mountain and say, please let me travel through your realm. May I reach the top in peace. May you all be well. I practice for the sake of all beings, and then I do it at the top and again when I went down. And everybody does it. Everybody. It's really lovely, actually. So then not only are you walking through, so this is the summit plateau of a mountain. You don't get that in Snowdonia, do you? It's just incredible trees. So this is a cedar. So I went to an island called Yakushima where there are cedars that are up to 8,000 years old. Just incredible. Just incredible. And there's something about treating the landscape as sacred and the people having a sense of the landscape as sacred. And so it kind of comes through to you as sacred as well. And similarly, you have distinct places where you can go and you can't go in the temple areas. And so there's a very strong culture where you do not step off the path, because you might stand on a flower, or you might squash something. So it's a very strong kind of almost like an ethical practice. You stay on the path. Humans stay on the path, and off the path, that is for all the other beings. So this is a summit plateau on Yakushima, and that is a forest of dwarf bamboo. And the other thing that Japan really has is live volcanoes. And I mean, I just get exactly the same sense of sacredness where it's almost like, the earth is alive. And again, the volcanoes are worshipped as manifestations of the Shinto kami, the gods. So this is Mount Aso in Kyushu, one of the southern islands. And there's something about like here, if I climb Snowdon this year, I know it'll be pretty much the same as when I climbed it 10 years ago. But these mountains are not like that. It just gives you this sense of impermanence. And you can see, massive craters appearing that apparently weren't there 5 years ago. And, things are falling away. Big rock falls, landslides. It's this radically unstable landscape in a way that, we just don't have a sense of being in a place that's geologically as stable as the UK. So actually, I'd be walking through these landscapes and I would find places to do pujas. I just love doing pujas on mountainsides. And, you just find somewhere without very many people and then you just sort of like belt it out to the volcano. And there are the swifts flying around in the sky and eating the insects and the nesting in the walls of the volcanic crater. It's just incredible landscapes. And also I would be saying that Kukai poem about impermanence a lot. So this is in Hokkaido, sunset. And a really lovely thing here was there was a few of us camping there. And everyone just went and stood on the edge of this kind of cliff where it went down. And we were all just stood there in silence watching the sun set. And just no one said anything for about half an hour. And then the sun dipped below the horizon and then people just sort of started like laughing and chatting. But it was, such a, just very, very beautiful experience. You can see I'm having an intense moment. Oops, what have we got here? Oh, it's a volcano. And again, just this sense of sacredness. So here it's like, I really wanted to walk over to that volcanic crater and there's nothing stopping you and it's all kind of like completely flat. But by that point, I'd been in Japan for nearly 5 months and it just felt like I would be desecrating something. It's like it was its own place and I could pass through and look at it, but I just didn't want to. There was just like a sort of level of respect for it where I didn't want to set foot off the path. Whereas normally in these, Snowdonia, I'm like, right, how can I get to the top without using the path? Who uses the path to get to this one? And very often I was sitting and meditating, just like finding somewhere and meditating. And my meditation really took off actually in a way that it hadn't since my ordination retreat. And in all sorts of kind of funny places, sometimes you're sort of sliding down a hill or it's really windy or whatever. And you get these flows of sulfur. So you get like the whole landscape that's just like bright yellow where it's erupted pure sulfur and it just kind of ends up being these sulfur boulders. And there's a smell in the air. You get a kind of acidic taste in your mouth and there's this sort of penetrating smell of eggs. That was the one I was trying to find. Here is a summit Shinto shrine and it's enshrining a round rock. So this was under a live volcano in Kyushu at a place where actually it had been a place of Buddhist practice and Shinto practice for a very long time. And the volcano had erupted, so they'd moved all the rupas to a safe location, which wasn't very safe actually, it was still quite close. But I was just fascinated by all the different kinds of iconography you get. So you've got a kind of a jizo, a sort of baby-headed jizo at that far end. And then you've got this fascinating character called Fudo Miu, who's a wrathful form who holds a flaming sword like Manjushri and a noose. And he's particularly popular in Shingon, this esoteric Buddhism. And you see him all over, little rupas by the side of the road. And that sort of character in the middle, well, again, I think it's Fudo Mu. Then we've got a canon of Avalokiteshvara, female Avalokiteshvara. And so you definitely get a sense that, I don't know, it's very regionally different as well. So you definitely get a sense in some places that people have a real connection with these rupas, even when I met people who considered themselves Buddhist, what they meant was they made offerings to those shrines, or they prayed to canon, say. They didn't say, oh, I meditate, or oh, I follow the precepts, or oh, I work with my mind. So it was like a very, very different meaning, what they meant by being Buddhist to what I meant by being Buddhist. Yeah, hand-carved Fudo Mu. And another one. And then on the top there, we've got the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So this is calling the name of Amida Buddha as a spiritual practice. And this is a summit. This is a summit of a mountain. Oops. And I'll show you that. And there we've got a little Jizo carrying a child to safety. Also, totally amazing wildlife. So this is orcas in the sea in North Japan. Just, snakes, birds, insects, wildflowers, salamanders, little stripy squirrel things, and bears. So I did actually meet bears, but when I met bears, I was too scared to think of getting my camera out. So this is Hokkaido, the northernmost island, so you just get like meadows, whole mountainsides, and everywhere you look there are mountains, and every mountain is covered in flowers. And quite often the different mountains have different flowers, because the volcanic conditions are very, very specific. So one particular sort of flower evolves to be able to live on that particular mountainside. But the next mountain peak, the conditions are different. So a different flower has evolved to be able to live on that mountainside. So everywhere you go, the flowers are just totally different. The plants you get are different. Yeah. Just very gorgeous. Did a puja there. Yeah. This is Hashidera. This is a big volcanic crater in the middle with hot springs coming up out of it. Okay, right. I think I'll stick with that one. So I just want to tell you about my bear encounters, or at least one of them, because I went to do this walk, and it was quite early in the season, so there was a lot of snow about and there weren't any other people about. And this was in northern Hokkaido, which is very wild anyway. It's the Shiratoko Peninsula. And there are all these notices saying, beware of the bears. And I was beginning to think the bears were fictitious. All the Japanese hikers carry these sort of bear bells, so you walk around clanking like a Swiss cow. And the idea is that the bear hears the bell and kind of makes itself scarce. Now, the bells are quite quiet, so I'm not quite sure how effective it is. But so there I am. I've kind of, anyway, there's a whole load of adventures to even just getting there. But anyhow, I get onto this high summit ridge with a lot of dwarf pine. It's volcanic. The streams are pouring sulphur, so they're all kind of like deposited yellow. And I can tell it's bear country because I've been passing big bear poos. They're about this big. You can't mistake them. And in patches of mud, there were bear prints, fresh bear prints. Now, what they tell you to do is you should turn around and go home at this point. But I'm kind of like, I've come all the way from the UK to climb these mountains. Of course, I'm not going to turn around. So I keep on going. And I mean, I think there are bears anyway, but and I'm about half an hour away from where I'm going to camp, and it's quite late in the day. It's been a long day. I'm tired, and the sun is going down, and I've got my head down, and I have been singing earlier in the day because you're supposed to sing to kind of keep the bears away. But like I'm tired, and I've stopped singing, and I just come round a rocky corner, and I don't see the bear, but what I hear is "Rah!" And the bear is about where Lake is, and it has 2 cubs. And this is a problem because generally bears don't want to eat you. Every now and again they do eat somebody, but mostly they don't. But if they have cubs, they're quite dangerous because they want to protect their cubs. And this bear is on its hind legs and it's roaring, and it really looks not very happy. And I don't think, oh, I'll get my camera out now. This would be a marvellous shot to a bear. I think, oh my God, it's a bear. And I turn around and I retrace my footsteps as quickly as I can without running, because you're not supposed to run because then it triggers a sort of chase reflex. But then what's happened, where you're supposed to camp is past the bear. So I think, okay, no, there was another one about an hour back. Right, I'll go back to that one. It's fine. You just stay there, bear. It's absolutely fine. And I retrace my footsteps, but actually it's like I'm totally alone. I saw one person early in the day. There's definitely nobody up there now. I'm going to be sleeping in a tent. A tent, so this bear, I'm about 50 kilos and a bear is 200 kilos, and I've just seen it and it was like up there, and I'm like, oh my God, that's a bear. So I get to this campsite and I'm putting out my tent and I'm feeling really scared because I just keep looking over my shoulder thinking, is it following me? Because it has been known that brown bears see somebody, they're hungry, they follow them, they eat them, your dinner. It does happen. It's not that common, but it does happen. So you can imagine what your imagination starts doing, can't you? And you're told you have to cook at least 100 meters away from your tent so that none of the cooking smells permeate, where you're going to sleep. And there are these big bear lockers, and they're kind of metal with a kind of, I think bears can't be that smart actually, because there's a thing you have to put your hand in to take the lever up. So the idea is that the bear tries to get in the bear locker, it can't get in, and so it gives up and it wanders away, and you're sleeping 100 meters away, and it goes away, not suspecting a thing. So I do this whole sort of like cooking over there, and basically I'm just feeling really, really terrified. And then I think, oh, the Buddha said something about this. The Buddha taught the Karaniya Metta Sutta to monks who were meditating in the forest and they were scared of snakes. Maybe I should apply this right now. So I started chanting Sabbe Sata Sukhi Hontu, may all beings be well and happy. And I started sending metta to the bear and its cubs. And do you know what? It worked. Like the situation was still exactly the same. I was still going to have to sleep underneath 2 layers of nylon with a potentially hungry bear with 2 cubs in the vicinity. But I felt okay about it. And I just lay there in my sleeping bag and I just wished the bear well until I dropped off to sleep. And it was like a marvel. It's like the Buddha teaches it, it works. So that was what I wanted to tell you about bears. Okay, And now I think that is definitely out of time. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful evening. I was hoping you were going to talk about bears, so it was like you saved it for the end. It was just great. Thank you. Wonderful. Really, yeah, really grateful to you.
And just to say, I mean, I think I probably should have said this before, but I think for me, the big dharmic point was basically I came back and I realised how precious Triratna is. And it's not that Triratna is the only place in the world where the Dharma is live and being practiced and is accessible to people. But it is a place where the Dharma is live and accessible and being practiced by people. And I really got a sense of like the liveness of this Sangha and how people really are working with their minds and they really are practicing what the Buddha taught. And in a way, Japanese Buddhism, it's a victim of its history and like the whole weight of everything that's happened historically with the Buddhist tradition in Japan. And it means that Buddhism, the Dharma, is not particularly accessible if you're Japanese. You think you know what it is, and you think what it is praying to Kannon for a safe birth, and it's not. So no Japanese person was interested in, you know, I had Westerners come to me and say, oh, you're Buddhist, tell me about what the Buddha taught. Japanese people think they know, but mostly they don't. So it's like, it's incredibly precious that we have a live Sangha where, you know, the Dharma is able to be practiced. And it's like, you know, it's a gift you couldn't, yeah, it's so precious. It's, you know, you could just take it for granted. Oh, here's Shrewsbury Buddhist Centre. Actually, it's a marvel. So there you go.
Let's come again, there's more, isn't there?
Yes, part two.
Part two.
The bear returns.
Yes.
Bear story.
Oh, there's more.